Well, it's that time of the morning when we take a look at the front pages of the international newspapers. And joining me to do that is the current affairs analyst, Dorcas Gwata. Dorcas, very good to see you this morning.
Thanks for having me again.
Well, let's start with the front page of Nigeria's This Day, and the headline, Central African Leaders Rally Africa Against Boko Haram.
And it is. It's finally a coordinated effort here to tackle the Boko Haram crisis. One wishes this was coordinated 2-3 years ago. Where would we be today? We've had so many people displaced within Africa, within Nigeria, and within the region. But it's great to see this coordination. It's great to see the African Union pulling its effort together here. But let's be fair. Sub-Sahara has been fighting two frontier wars with the Ebola crisis and then the Boko Haram, which raises questions about allocation of resources and capacity. But we must acknowledge the efforts that are coming together today.
And there are also calls for the UN Security Council to become involved because, as you mentioned, this has been going on for some time, and Nigeria has been almost trying to fight Boko Haram by themselves before looking to get extra help.
And, you know, when Nigeria puts its minds together, it can do it. It has capacity. It was just slow at responding. I think they thought that they could do it, but what they were faced with in the scope of Boko Haram, the style of these terrorists around the world is very, very interesting. It's a different style. They're using women and children, the most vulnerable groups of people, to actually fight a war. So I think that it was actually a question of appetite. Did Jonathan prioritize this? I think he underestimated. He didn't allocate enough resources. He didn't take care of his army. There have been questions here about was the Nigerian army supported enough? Did they feel supported enough to come onto the frontier? But it's great. Let's acknowledge the highest cost, Richard, of course, will be felt at ground level. Children, women and children who have been hugely displaced and suffering. And
it's certainly become a big election issue because we'll have the election
Indeed.
coming up in Nigeria, and
Indeed.
we know that it was delayed because of the Boko Haram fighting. It gives people a voice also to give their impression of how Nigeria has been tackling this issue.
It does, but if you're an average Nigerian voter, then uncertainties do not go away. The issues here aren't just about Boko Haram. There is much about the economy, safety, security, a very vocal African diaspora. We had Mr. Abisonja here a couple of weeks ago in London, absolutely mounted by the diaspora in terms of how he's supporting Nigeria. I think Boko Haram is just a fraction of Nigeria's challenges. The issues here and the stakes are pretty high for Nigeria.
Okay, well, let's move on now to the front page of the Daily Telegraph in the United Kingdom, and it's got plenty of stories, one of Eddie Redmayne from the Oscars there. But next to that is a story about support for 540,000 dementia carers. It's an issue that doesn't get a lot of attention usually.
And it's refreshing to hear it here, also with some support for some more research. But let's be clear, politicians normally drum up a lot of promises on the run-up to elections. And the NHS, I work in the NHS, is very much fragile to that. They must keep their promises here. They are asking for more psychological support for carers, which is much, much needed. This is a long endurance disease, which I work with very, very closely. But I can hear my GP colleagues saying, well, where's the money? Where's the support? How is this going to be funded? The NHS has been streamlined to its bare bottom. So this must be absolutely followed up with support and funding.
Because a lot of the time we hear about the actual people with dementia, but this is really looking at people who care for people with dementia, and they're a forgotten group of people. Absolutely,
and our culture of care in this country is quite different from other countries, where care is supported within the family. Here it's very much individualized care, which falls very heavily on government. But it is absolutely refreshing. Those who do look after patients with dementia do for many years. Some of them running full-time jobs.
Certainly. All right, we're going to now have a look at the front page of the Wall Street Journal Asian edition. And one story that you've actually picked out that you'd like to discuss is jihadists managed to slip through the tight European dragnet.
It's a real realization of where we are with this war. This article is discussing the porous borders and responsibilities, jurisdictional responsibilities within countries to look into this. But let's be clear about the scale of what we're dealing with. We're dealing with almost 1,000 lone wolves who are managing on their own, funded from God knows where, but these people have managed to slip through borders. Can we honestly ask Bulgaria to screen people sufficiently when they're fighting their own internal problems? Turkey is geographically positioned so that they are falling into, they're rubbing borders with many other countries, and we know a lot of them are flying to Turkey. But if we're asking Turkey to do more, we must support Turkey. So we've got a challenge here.
Because we're always thinking that people are going to go the conventional route if they're going to go somewhere. But this is sort of showing that people are travelling to one country by car, then going by boat somewhere else to get into these places. And it's very hard for border control to keep an eye on all those open borders.
And it is. And we're hearing the story of the 3 girls who've gone missing from UK. These are children in London who are influenced, sometimes funded. These tickets are not bought from the UK, they're bought from somewhere. So we've got a challenge. This is a regional challenge. It's a global challenge. I think it needs a new kind of intelligence. We're going to have to fight this. And it's going to be up to each one of us to be responsible to report this. I can see the Asian community very, very, very nervous about the families of these 3 girls. It's distressing. Because
also that Europe was, for many years, talking about having open borders within Europe, and now this actually puts that sort of in question.
It does, and Europe before all this, at least the height end of this, had its own challenges, not least economically. So this is a new challenge.
Well, have a look at the Wall Street Journal Europe edition now, and it has a story that was also on the Telegraph, and it says that UK officials accused of peddling power, and this relates to 2 former foreign secretaries.
It does, and I like the headings in the West. So it says peddling powers. In Africa, they would have called it downright corruption, and they would have nailed it down to that.
Because they were taking payment for giving
speeches.
speeches.
Absolutely. So in my words, it's corruption, and it must be nailed at that. These are 2 very powerful positions here. This is not an ordinary sort of MP position. So their ability to influence and direct is pretty high. But the usual call, we'll have an inquiry. The inquiry will say nothing came out of it, and that'll be the end of it. But the issues here are how much of this is happening underground, undetected. Jack Straw has raised a question of whether this was, set up in the run-up to elections, and maybe it was. But how much of this goes on undetected? We want to know. All of us who are otherwise innocent taxpayers who are going about our jobs and coming back home feel a bit hurt about this.
It will come down to whether they have actually used their influence and power to influence other people with decision-making. And that's what that inquiry will be looking at.
Indeed, indeed.
Also on the front page of the Europe edition is a picture of the Russian President Vladimir Putin attending a wreath-laying ceremony in Moscow on Monday. This all comes at an interesting time when, as we heard earlier in the program, that he's saying that he's ruling out any war with Ukraine. But it seems like that's what's happening.
I think Ukrainians would say they are at war. They've been attacked by Putin. Putin had it's incredible how we can watch before our eyes a crisis go from a little crisis, Crimea, a plane comes down, before we know the full-scale war is going on. Putin has a responsibility because he has a bigger power and a bigger capability. So he had a responsibility to backpedal this war and this conflict and calm it down and settle it. But it didn't, because there are benefits to him. And he's gained a lot from this crisis. It's incredibly sad. And again, Richard, as I would always say, the cost of this is always felt the ordinary person within that region, whether they are pro-Russian or not. Their everyday life will be very difficult.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens with that, because there's a meeting actually in Europe today to discuss that ceasefire and to see how it will hold. Dorcas Gwata, thanks very much for talking to us. Always good to chat.
Thank you very much.